but it was a donation-only place. Normally you pay a small fee, but this was donation. And then they had this huge communal dinner where everyone helped cook, and everyone set up tables, and everyone cleaned, and then everybody ate together and drank wine, and then you cleaned up, and then everybody went to bed. And at this dinner, I was reminded of, does everyone know what the word generosity means? Yeah, maybe. It's like, it's being very giving. It's being very open to give and receive as well. Being generous to yourself as well as to others. So I was reminded of a proverb I heard a long time ago, that a person goes to the afterlife, or gets to see the afterlife, and it's the traditional heaven and hell afterlife. So they go into one room, and they see people sitting around a table, and they're all eating soup. But the bowls are way too small for their huge spoons, and they are unable to eat, and they're constantly trying to get into these bowls with these huge spoons, and they can't do it. And so it's described to this person as, this is hell. And then he's like, I wonder what heaven's like. And they go to the next room, and it's the same exact room. The spoons are too big for the bowls are way too small, they're all eating soup, but they learn to feed one another. And I thought about this when I was at this certain place because they wanted somebody to say something, and I didn't say it because I thought about it afterwards, as per usual. But this is the place where I met the beginning of my Camino family, what I would consider my Camino family, and learned what it is to be generous and how deeply important that is. And I think in all of life, we can be the most generous to one another we possibly can, and that is the best gift of all, as well as to yourself. So, thank you. And then we want to do a card.
May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. May I be whole. May I be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be whole. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be whole.
So in the spirit of the Camino, something I loved about the Camino that was very indicative of what it is. So you're walking on this old Catholic pilgrimage. Whether not very many people, a lot of people are still Catholic, but there's so many people of different faiths or non-faiths, and you're walking through this there's churches everywhere. These beautiful churches that you pop up into a small town. This huge church with very Baroque architecture on the inside, but you're also walking and you're very dirty and you're very scruffy looking. And I decided to be today looking very scruffy looking. So instead of dressing in the suit that I left in my grandmother's closet and going so we're going to do joys and concerns. And I'm going to light a joy just simply for being back in this place after a long time of being gone. And it's very nice to be back and seeing so many wonderful, loving, generous faces. So thank you. If you'd like to share your joys and concerns, you can come on up.
This is for Judy's birthday. Can we sing her happy birthday?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Judy. Happy birthday to you. And many more.
Thank you.
And this is for Lisa and Abby battling awful stomach virus.
I think it's sermon time.
Kids
Oh.
need to sign up.
They can stay if they want.
The little people. The older kids
We'll
are
take the
staying,
wiggly
and the younger
ones.
people are gone.
Yeah, the little
Okay.
guy.
So let's sing the little ones off to their class.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
All right. So here's my attempt to get a month-long journey down to, I think I'm about 30 minutes or so. It's supposed to be 20, it'll probably be 30, hopefully not more. So I don't know why I walked the Camino de Santiago. At least I didn't know why when I started. Okay, so that was a lie. I do know why I walked the Camino de Santiago. Now, it took me till like day 32 to really figure it out. But when I started, I wrote down in my journal to let and to let go. Because there's much I need to let go of and to let happen to me. Something I also really needed to learn is how to not stress so much about time and worrying that I don't have enough time, because the lesson that I think everyone can definitely learn is that you have plenty of time. So first week, this could be really, really unplanned and impromptu. So just to let you guys know, I have a little cheat sheet, but if anybody has any questions, they can just pop their hand up and ask anytime. So I started, I was like, I'm gonna get up at 5:45 every morning and be out by 6. And that was hard a little bit, but you get up and then you're walking in the dark for maybe an hour and a half, and then the sun comes up. And you have this beautiful, beautiful sunrise as you're climbing the mountain or walking down the trail or heading down the hill. And on the first morning, I was told not to, so the first morning you climb over this mountain, that when it gets really cold and really snowy, people have died climbing that mountain. It's not that terrible, but the weather can be fickle. And it was kind of rainy the night before, and the hospitalera told me not to climb. And as I'm leaving, I'm kind of like, should I climb, should I not? And I see this trickle of ant pilgrims climbing the mountain. And so I decided to follow. And right as the sun started to come up, the sky pretty much opened up, and it was this beautiful sunrise. And I was like, great, I think I chose wisely on this one. So I didn't start the Camino walking. I started the Camino walking alone. But every single day you meet new people. You're walking with different people. The first day I walked with a guy from New Jersey who was about my age and about my fitness. And we talked the whole way, and then I never saw him again after that day. So that's day 1. Day 2 is more sore, but day 1 was climbing the mountain. And I think the climbing the mountain day is one of the hardest days. So I'm going to go ahead and skip to day 8. Prior to day 8, I didn't start with the intention of falling in love on the Camino, but I had this kind of idea in the back of my mind that I was like, what if I met the person of my life, and then I decided to stay the rest of my life with this person, and got to live in Europe and be like dual citizenship status. So it wasn't an intention, but on the second day I actually met a girl from New Zealand whose name is Annabelle, who I, for whatever reason, became outrageously smitten with, and I've never told her that I felt that way. But we walked together for about a week. Day 8 is when we kind of split off, and I walked ahead, frustrated with my inability to bring it up, and yeah, and also not necessarily wanting to bring it up because that wasn't my intention. But I got to Grignon, which is the one I talked about during the children's story, and you walk into this cathedral. You walk into the side of this cathedral church thing. Well, we walked in. There's a donkey outside, tied up. I hadn't seen a donkey, and then apparently the donkey was eating the bushes. So somebody came and told the owner of the donkey that they had to move the donkey, and then I never saw the donkey again. But yeah, I had this dinner with this big group of people. I met Dave, Serena, Anna, and Pablo, who became part of my Camino family. Dave was from Scotland, Serena and Anna were from Italy, and Pablo was from Spain but lived in the Canary Islands. Dave and Serena did that thing that I talked about before, is that they met on the Camino, and they didn't really necessarily have the intention of finding one, and now they're living together in Italy after finishing the Camino together. So that's something I get to check up on Facebook and see how they're doing. But after the dinner, after eating together, we were surprised when the hospitalero, Harry, came down and he said that they have a special candlelight thing before going to bed. So we all went to the choir loft of this beautiful church, and we all sat in a circle, and then we passed around a candle and got to say some words or sing a song in whatever language. And as other people were going around, I started thinking about Dad. And it came around to me, and this is a song he sang to me and my brother all the time, if I remember correctly, but he sang, "Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on singing this song." And I passed off the candle. But that was the place where the community became real for me. Not only just because I had this further experience of generosity, and not only because I met my family, but when I just started to think about why I was really there. And I didn't really know why I was going to be there. So I'll get back to that later as I go. So I'm going to go ahead and skip all the way to day 20 because I don't have a ton of time. Oh, I'm going really fast. I do have more time. Okay, all right. So I started walking with Pablo, and then we met up with Matt, who's actually from Portland, and then we met up with Antonio, who's from Colombia, and it was me at 22, Pablo's 27, Matt was 32, then Antonio was 50. You meet many different people, many different walks of life, and different ages and experiences. But that became like my kind of core 4 of my family, like my nuclear family on the Camino, with the extension of Dave and Serena and Anna and Annabelle and other people that I met as I went. But we started walking together, and we would have, I don't know, I think the Camino is definitely a spiritual experience, but we had the most irreverent of times at times in conversations, and it was wonderful. But we would often find our place we'd get to the albergue late or early, and then we would do our normal kind of routine of like taking a shower after walking and being gross for the entire day. And then we'd go find the largest meal for the least amount of money we possibly could. We found this one meal that was like €10 for 5 plates of food. And if they gave us, and if we asked for more food of anything, they'd give it to us for free. And like half a bottle of wine each. And that was really wonderful. That's the thing about Spain, is the Spanish culture is that they want to make the customer happy. But with the Camino growing as like a tourist attraction, there's a lot of kind of capitalist ideals coming in. And so a lot of places are definitely out for profit. They have a lot of pilgrims meals everywhere that are cheap. But they're also like usually a slice of meat and some fries with some wine and maybe some green salad. And if you pay a little bit more, you can get the menu del dia, which is the menu of the day, which is for the locals, which is way more delicious and feel like. So day 20, I'll skip ahead to day 20. After not seeing Annabelle for like 2 weeks, I ran into her the day before, and then this is in Ponce Baron. And then we all gathered together. This is the second place I think the Camino became really spiritual for me. The Ponce Baron is this small like collection of like 4 buildings, and then there's like a few ruined buildings around, and then there's pasture, and you're on top of this mountain, and it's usually snowy except during the summer and the early fall. But this is one of the most communal places because I think it was the place the most people were together at once that I knew. And it was, the albergue itself was this building with a kind of mess hall, and then there's rooms upstairs, and then there was rooms in another building, and then they had like a yoga studio where I ended up sleeping on a mattress, and it was, they had cows and chickens and goats and rabbits everywhere, and so I spent a good amount of this time wandering around this area, seeing these things. But the thing that was really important about that day is we sat down to this conversation. Rather than that, in the first maybe couple kilometers of the next day is the Cruz de Ferro, which is the Iron Cross, ascent on top of the mountain. There's this pile of rocks because you're supposed to take a stone from where you're from and carry it on the Camino and then leave it at the Cruz de Ferro. And I didn't bring a stone. But right before leaving for my trip, my mom handed me a small Tupperware container that held my dad's ashes. And last minute, I didn't know what I was going to do with this on my entire trip. I thought I'd just carry it around, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I put it in my Camino backpack last minute. So for the entire time, I would reach back, and then I'd feel it, and be like, oh yeah, that's there. And so I had that, and then on day 4 or 5, I was walking along this road, and there's all these snail shells everywhere. There's snails climbing up the screed stalks to probably mate and then die and then fall and then whatever. But there's lots of snail shells. I picked up a ton of snail shells, and I was like, hey, I'm like a snail. I'm moving really slow. They either crushed in my bag, or I gave them away to people, or left them places, and there's one left. So when we got to Cruz de Ferro, I went up to the cross, and I put a little bit of my dad inside the snail shell and left him on top of a rather large stone, and saying, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around again. And then I put my backpack on and walked down with Antonio and Pablo down the mountain. But that's where I realized that I had been walking for 20 days, this is day 20, day 21, and 3 weeks, and I had been carrying my father on my back the entire way. I knew he was there, but I don't think I really knew he was there. And that became real for me. Once again, along perfect honesty and being 22 years old and not really looking for girls, but then I met a girl named Alex, who's German, and she was beautiful, and we hung out a bit, and then I was like, this wasn't my intention, but then I was like, maybe this is my chance. And decided one day, there's this last climb up this I think it's the second hardest climb of the Camino. You're climbing up this mountain to the very top is where you enter into Galicia, which is the last section of the Camino. It's the last province for the Camino, and Galicia is very Celtic. It has a lot of Celtic origins, and the weather's very similar to Ireland and Scotland. And it's also the unconquered section of Spain from like the Moorish conquests. But I decided right before getting to the top of the mountain that I was going to separate from Antonio, Pablo, and Matt and stay with Alex. And I was there for maybe about 30 minutes to an hour, and I was like, what have I done? I had chosen to leave my Camino family for a girl who's beautiful, but that wasn't why I was there. That wasn't part of my trip. And so I stewed for like the entire evening, like, what am I gonna do about this? They're already gone. They're only 4 kilometers up the mountain, but I was like, they're already gone. They're not gonna be there. And then at dinner, I was like, Alex, I gotta go. In the morning, I gotta go. She was like, okay. So I got up even earlier than I normally did the next morning. Made eye contact with this father-son pair from England who had seen me and Alex the night before, and they gave me like, are you making a runner look? And so then I talked to them later, like a few days later, and they're like, yeah, you definitely made a runner, didn't you? I guess so, you could say that. But yeah, in climbing up this super steep mountain thing, that was like 4 kilometers to Osabreo, which is the first stop in Galicia. I made it like under an hour. Like I was like, I gotta get there. And then I found a cafe con leche, a coffee with milk, and I somehow managed to see that. So I had my phone with me, and I would only connect with Wi-Fi. So I sent a message really fast to Pablo. I'd be like, I hope he gets it. And they hadn't left yet. So they came, and then we had like a prodigal son coming to Jesus talk thing. And I'm like, hey, here. And then we continued to walk 40 kilometers to Samos. And that was probably the best day of my Camino, is kind of, figuring out why I was there. Like, I didn't know why I was there. And I realized that family's always been important to me in my life. Where the Walker family has always been very connected. So is the Boucher family, and for the most part. And and I realized that was really important, that I definitely did not want to fall in love and have that whole thing for my life and have that define my Europe adventure thing and my Camino. And that I was there for different reasons. And so I walked, Galicia is normally really rainy. It's like pouring down rain, supposedly. And we get to the top of this mountain and it's blue skies everywhere. And you look out in the distance and there's little mountain islands in a sea of clouds and way far out. And then, so we walked for 40K, we get into this river valley which leads to Samos, which the guidebook told me not to go here. And the guidebook is very wrong. Because you're walking along these trails that are definitely medieval Camino trails. And then at the end you get to this huge monastery that's built probably in the 9th or the 10th century that is huge and is beautiful, and there's people who are still monks there and practicing the faith there. And I don't know, I just had the most wonderful experience of like realizing what was important to me. And then we get to the end of we get to Samos, and there's Dave and Serena and Anna there, and a couple others that I hadn't seen in a while. And we met up with our friend Jan, who is 67, and he had been walking for 4 months from Holland. So we met up with him, and it was very nice to meet with him. And, just realizing, I don't know, just really trying to figure out why I was there. I still don't think I knew, but I had a better clue. 15 more minutes. So there's that story. So the next week and a half, you're walking the last week and a half to Santiago, which is beautiful. There's lots of wonderful stories there, but I don't think I have a short amount of time. But we stopped about 5K out of Santiago and had one last night, like party with all of our friends before we entered Santiago. And as I was walking, I realized in like the last few days that the Camino is definitely a metaphor for life. Like you have your own life in this month span of time that's completely different than the rest of your life. That may be more, I don't know, spiritually real than the rest of your life. I don't know, we'll figure it out. But you're walking, there's an end point in every life. There's a death. And having Santiago being my death, had this like really terrifying reaction to me, but then realizing that it is a death, and there is a rebirth at the end of it, but you're still having to choose to continue to walk to death. You don't have a choice. Or you do have a choice. You can stop. You can turn around in this sense, but making the choice to keep walking was just an interesting realization for me. And I'm only 22 years old, so I still have a weird lack of mortality ideas. I was really well articulated because I'm really good at articulating that. But yeah, it's interesting. And well, you get into Santiago, and it's this grand cathedral, and everyone's hugging, and everyone's celebrating, and you're taking pictures with your friends. And I knew I was walking further. I knew I was walking to Finisterre, the end of the earth. But my friends weren't. And so you get there. These people you've been walking with for 3 weeks or more, or the entire way, and you have to say goodbye. So we had dinner, we had wine, we had drinks, and then in the morning, I left really late. But in the morning, we had one friend we ran into, we hadn't seen for probably weeks, and he showed up, and we had this wonderful reconnection with Tom, the man from Dublin, who's also in his 60s. And then he left it, so he slid a note underneath our door in the morning saying goodbye, and I never saw him again. And then we went to breakfast with Pablo, and then Pablo left, and then we never saw him again. And then Antonio and Mac, we're going to take the bus to Finisterre that day, and then come back. And I was walking along the trail, so that we would probably pass each other, but we said goodbye, and I never saw them again. I will see them again, but on the Camino, I didn't see them again. And so I discovered that, at least for my Camino, from my experience, if you say goodbye on the Camino, you don't see those people again. So that, I don't know what that is supposed to mean, but that was just really interesting. And it comes up later. There are people I didn't say goodbye to early on the Camino, and then they showed up again. So that's very nice to know. So yeah, I decided I wanted to walk alone to Finisterre, the end of the earth. I knew I needed to walk alone. And I think I needed to connect with Dad, but I didn't know how to do that. So I walked and talked to myself, as I always do, and talked with other people. I met new people, but I was always walking alone. Day 2 of walking to Finisterre was when the rain came. There was no rain pretty much the entire Camino. There was some at the beginning, some in the middle, a little bit, and then torrential. And I walked for probably over 30 kilometers in torrential rain, and just I found my solace at the end of this woman who had just opened an albergue in her house, and she was a grandmother. And I walked in, and she doesn't speak any English, and I was like, "Is this an albergue?" And then I don't speak Spanish, and so we went. She's like, "Yeah." So see, and then I found that on the Camino you have these beds, and you're carrying your sleeping bag with you, but there was beds with blankets and pillows, and there was a washing and drying machine, and there was a dinner. I was so pleased after being completely soaked, drenched, from the moment I stepped out the door in the morning till when I got in, and that was really nice. So I get up the next day, and it's still pouring down rain. And everyone's like, well, I think we don't really want to walk in the rain again, so we're going to take a taxi to Finisterre, or we're going to take the bus. Or there's some people who are going back, and they were going to walk back, but they're not going to walk back. And I was like, I'm going. So I left, and it was like an hour of torrential rain, but then it stopped. And as the day went on, it cleared up more and more and more. And by noon, the sun was out, there was not a cloud in the sky, and I was walking in perfect sunlight. And as I was walking, I saw a couple people I knew, a couple other pilgrims on the Camino, but it was pretty solitary. And I sang to myself, Deep River, a song called There for the Grace of God Go I, which is, I think, written by Dave King. And then I sang The Water by Johnny Flynn. And as I was walking, I came to Finisterre, and you see Finisterre is this long bluff that sticks out into the ocean, and you walk. So I decided I wasn't going to check it over again. I needed to finish at Finisterre, to walk all the way. So I walked, and it ended up being like another 3 kilometers along this thing. But I walked all the way, and then I got there, and I set down my bag, and I took a little Tupperware container out of my backpack. And I noticed that you could walk down the bluff a bit if you were careful. So I walked down this bluff to the rocks below the ocean, and I stood there and I sang these 3 songs again. And then I opened the container and dashed Dad on these rocks at the end of the earth. And climbed back up the cliff, wrote a note and put it in the thing and left the container on this cross where everybody was leaving memorabilia. And if I had that, I didn't know how I felt yet. I was relieved, but I knew it was the right thing to do for me at that moment. Carrying Dad was not something that I was doing for him, I realized, but it was something I was doing for me, and something that I needed to connect back with him. Something that I hadn't really thought much about Dad, or really coped with his death for probably 2.5 years. And I think that was the beginning that I had not yet started. We'll do after. So right as I was writing this note, somebody I hadn't mentioned, but Tibor from Budapest walked in, who I hadn't seen since probably day 3. And he was the start of the generosity thing, because multiple nights he would cook dinner and then have too much and then feed us. And that was the thing, is on the Camino you'd cook too much food and then you'd feed other pilgrims. But we had this big embrace, and the next day we walked to Musha, which is another 30 kilometers north to probably a much more beautiful area than I think Finisterre is, but it's not the end of the Camino, it's not the end of the earth. But as I was walking, I thought more about Dad and what I had done, and I got to Musha, and we entered the water. We took off most of our clothes and left our backpacks, and we jumped in the ocean. And I, floating at the end of the earth, felt this huge sense of relief and accomplishment of finishing this. And I thought about Dad and what that meant for me, and just choosing to remember is something hard to do. So,
sustains me without even trying. The
water can't drown me, I'm done with my dying. Now the light that I knew is a dream, and the line in the distance grows faint. So wide is my river, the horizon a sliver, the artist has run out of paint. Where the blue of the sea meets the sky, and the big yellow sun leads me home. I'm everywhere now, the way is I'll vow to the wind of each breath by and by. The water sustains me without even trying. The water can't drown me, I'm done with my dying. So something I had to let is also losing my father, but I also lost my spiritual leader, who definitely was important to me. And I think for my faith-based reasoning, I have not really opened myself back up to faith at all since his death. And long before his death, I was struggling with it. But that song is all about, I think it's all about having faith. I think it's particularly a Christian song-ish, and so it seems to have that imagery. But or not really Christian, just it's religious. And I had lots of conversations with people on the Camino about the difference between having religion and having faith. And I think a lot of my life I've had a hard time with religion, which has cut me off to faith. But you don't have to have religion to have faith, or follow a specific religion. And so I think that's something that's my new work, is I think what I learned on the Camino is I have faith in generosity, to bring it back, but the faith in the generosity of humans, of individuals, and that we all are sharing on this experience together of life, whether that's a Camino life, or that's like a real life, and we can find love everywhere, and especially within ourselves for others. So after finishing in Musha, I had dinner with Tibor, and then we took the bus back the next morning to Santiago, which is really weird to ride a bus after walking. You cover 80 kilometers of walking, 2 days of walking in like an hour and a half. Weird. But as we were walking back into Santiago, I wanted to go back towards the cathedral. He wanted to go to the albergue, and so we said goodbye. And then I went to the albergue later, the same albergue, and I still didn't find him, because I said goodbye. But I saw lots of other friends I hadn't seen in a long time, and we went out and had a final dinner. And the Camino provides is the title of this, because along the Camino you find the things that you need when you need them. And I had my walking stick. The next day I had to leave, and then I was going to take a plane to Madrid. And I had my walking stick, but I didn't want to just leave it somewhere or give it to a random person. But then I was like, okay, I have to. So I walked to the park where you start walking to Breathing Stair. And as I was walking, there was a pilgrim ahead of me, and he turned. And I recognized him as someone I had met the night before. And so I was like, well, perfect. So I gave him my walking stick, because he didn't have one. And he's like, great, thank you, I needed that. And I let him go. And then so I left and I walked to the bus stop, and took the bus to Madrid, and that was the end of my Camino experience. But I take a lot with me, and I have a lot more friends, and I have a lot more connections around the world, and wonderful shared experiences that I'm willing to share at any time. So, thank you. So I think we're going to go ahead and do a closing circle and sing a song. What? Hymn? We want to do a hymn. We're doing a hymn. Sorry. It's a hymn that we were supposed to do. Okay, yeah, this is a hymn that I forgot that I wanted to do in the middle of my sermon, because as I was climbing the hill to Here's the Pharaoh, this song popped into my head while the sun was rising up behind me, and I think it was one of Dad's favorite hymns. I could be wrong.